Hello, Neogenians. Welcome to Dawn of the New Earth. And today we're exploring how Satan is not what you think and how to harness his power before it destroys you from the inside out. Because today we're exploring the tree of death and the tunnels of Set. This is going to be our final video on the tunnels of Set, at least for now, as we explore the final ones, which includes Satan. It's going to be a very important video as we begin to understand how to integrate these dark aspects within us. We're going to get started right away, but as always, remember, my friends, this is way more than a channel. This is a revolution of consciousness. We are here to wake the world the fuck up, so make sure you hit like and subscribe so we can spread this like fire, because we want to create a better world. Also, if you want to help out even more, become a member. You get access to a lot of great stuff like members-only videos, free downloads on inner transformation, like Kabbalah and alchemy. There's a ton of members-only videos. You get access to videos before the public does. A lot of great stuff, and it helps out the channel, and I appreciate it. You can also check out my books, and if you're looking for a free way to support, you can follow me on Spotify. Spotify is an excellent way to reach new viewers, new listeners, and it's completely free to follow me on there. So please do. Helps out a lot. Okay. Links to all of those things are in the description of this video. You'll find them all there. Okay. So let's begin, my friends. Today we are talking about Satan, the darkest archetype, the most important archetype when it comes to dealing with the tree of death, to understand and integrate. This is key. Because if you do this, you'll harness his power. And this will give you a better life, a more fulfilling life. But if you don't, it can destroy you and eat you from the inside. So that's what we're talking about today. Let's begin. I want to give a very quick recap and overview of what it is that we are talking about today. I'm going to do this very quick. So if you've heard all this before, don't worry about it. You know the drill. Okay, so we're talking about the tree of life and the tree of death. What the heck are these things? These are symbolic models of the psyche, okay? So just take the tree of death the tree of life for right now. This is a model of consciousness and higher consciousness, okay? And it's symbolic because you associate it with different aspects of the mind. Each one of these spheres are called sephirot, and each of the sephirot relate to a level of consciousness. So you start at the lowest level of consciousness and you go higher and higher and higher and higher to higher and higher levels of consciousness until you basically reach God consciousness. It's a symbolic model of the psyche. The tree of death is its inverted counterpart, where the energy of these levels of consciousness get twisted into their shadow versions, meaning that these are what block you from reaching higher levels of consciousness. They are called kelipot. So sephirot, kelipot, or sephirot and klipot. So the sephirot and klipot are inversions of each other, light and the twisted light, the husks or the shells as they are called. And so to reach higher levels of consciousness, you need to also block the distorted energy that's blocking you from doing this. And the different paths are the lessons that you need to integrate to reach the highest levels or to clear up different blockages, okay? And the reason why that we use these symbols, we talk about things like angels and demons, is because your unconscious communicates through the language of symbolism, not the language of words, okay? So we want to communicate with our unconscious mind. We're mapping the psyche. And so the tree of life and the tree of death is like technology. It's psychological technology. It's soul technology. It allows you to map out and navigate the realm of the unconscious, because the unconscious communicates through symbols. That's why we use symbols. Doesn't mean that there are literal angels fluttering around with wings or demons with pitchforks. They are icons or archetypal symbols that represent forces within you, within your psyche, and this is how we talk about them. Okay, so we're going to get started right away. From where we left off last time. So we're coming very near the end. Let's see where we're at here. So tunnel 12. Okay, tunnel number 12 is Barachiel, okay? Barachiel is number 12. And Barachiel connects Sateriel and Tamiel, okay? So it's this tunnel right here that connects Sateriel and Tamiel. See, we're pretty much, we're not pretty much, we are at the top of the tree now, okay? So Binah means understanding. Sateriel is the twisted version of Binah, which is the concealer, conceals. Chokhmah is wisdom. Forget Chokhmah. Keter is the crown and represents unity. Taumiel is the twisted version, which means it represents division. All right? So, the path that we're talking about links concealment and division together. All right? Now, psychologically, this is heavy. It's where concealed structure meets ultimate division. And if we're talking about the planetary associations, we have the shadow of Saturn, which is the black cube of Saturn, connected to the shadow of Pluto, which is Pluto and Chiron's void. So this is consciousness fractured at the highest level. Barachiel is the shadow of the magician. Okay? Which means, all right, this tunnel is going to be about language, communication, symbols, and the power to shape reality through the mind. So, the Mercury Tarot card is associated with, the Magician Tarot card is associated with Mercury, okay? The Magician Tarot card is associated with Mercury. So Barachiel is Mercury in its distorted form. Mercury is the messenger, the communicator. But the idea here is that this is also related to Hermes, the trickster. So we have here this idea of language and communication, but it's what's the twisted version of that? Deception. You see, we have Sateriel, the concealer, when it comes with the power of language, results in deception, the deceiver. So this is the ape of Thoth that imitates wisdom. So Thoth is about communication and language. The ape of Thoth is this little ape that fucks around with the language to confuse it. All right? So what's going on here? And remember, we're at the very top of the tree. We're dealing with very high levels of consciousness here. So a lot of this can be very abstract. If it doesn't click with you right away, it's one of those things, just watch it a couple times, let it wash over you. We're talking about some of the highest levels of consciousness here, so it can be a little tricky to understand if it's your first time coming across this stuff. But don't worry about it. It's all going to be good. So what is Barachiel? This is the tunnel of the cult leader archetype. And it represents the one who knows how to speak, but speaks in a way that divides and conceals instead of unites. So when Barachiel blocks you, your relationship to language becomes corrupted. This is what it means. You are the corrupted magician. You understand how people think. You even have some degree of understanding of divinity. You understand how symbols work. You understand how narratives shape reality. You understand how consciousness works. You understand how to manipulate consciousness. But instead of using your knowledge and understanding to ultimately help people reach higher and higher levels of consciousness, you use it to control. So this is where communication stops being about truth and starts becoming about control for personal gain. You twist words, selectively reveal information, or frame reality in a way that benefits you personally. A lot of manipulation. You see this in cults and secret societies and religions. It happens quite a lot in those domains. You might not even technically lie, but you distort, okay? So that is Barachiel, the magician corrupted, the magician who becomes the illusionist who deceives. This will be like through manipulative spiritual leaders or gurus who demand secrecy or obedience. Barachiel divides, cuts truth into pieces, distorts, and hands it out selectively. So here's the thing. Language shapes reality in the human mind. Language shapes reality in the human mind. Language shapes consciousness. So this distortion at the level of Barachiel becomes incredibly dangerous. Very, very dangerous. This is how entire belief systems trap people. This is how minds are literally colonized. So Barachiel may even try to convince you, and I've seen this happen, that, the truth is too powerful for humanity. If people understand truth, they would panic or collapse or destroy themselves. I've seen, people who are involved with secret societies like make this excuse like, people can't handle the truth. They can't handle it. We have to lead them. We have to be the one who we have to withhold this information because they couldn't handle it. Or we have to give them this really dumbed down version of it. So that's what Barachiel does. Barachiel can convince you of that because, most people don't think they're the bad guy. They convince themselves that it's for a positive purpose, but it's not. Barachiel is that twisted energy within you that controls. Now, remember, we're talking about very high levels of consciousness here. So it's about an individual that has gotten a very high level of consciousness that understands divinity, understands truth, understands symbolism, but uses it to control rather than to liberate. Okay, but what about when we integrate Barachiel? Remember, we want to integrate all of these patterns exist within us. So we want to acknowledge them and then redirect that energy in a positive way. So when we integrate Barachiel, integrate is a fancy word that means deal with. So when we say integrate Barachiel, it means deal with Barachiel. How do we deal with Barachiel? You can't just get rid of Barachiel. It's part of you. So how do you integrate it? You integrate it where you use the power of language and the knowledge of symbolism and archetype and metaphor, not to control, but rather to liberate. Now, let me explain. Again, this is some high-level stuff, so don't feel bad if it's a little confusing at first. That's totally fine. Just listen to it, and it'll click. So this is where the Aleister Crowley's grade of the magus becomes important. The magus is the magician. And what is a magus? Well, Crowley said that the magus utters a word that reshapes the world, and that a magus ushers in a new eon. What does that mean? A magus ushers in a new phase of consciousness. A magus arrives in the world and transmits information such that it kickstarts a new level of consciousness in humanity. So, for example, you could say that Jesus was a magus, just as an example. But here's the interesting thing that Crowley said about the magus, that the magus speaks in lies. Why? Because absolute truth cannot be spoken directly. Can't be spoken directly to the human mind. It has to be translated into symbols, metaphors, stories, and language that the human psyche can digest. So you see here that when we're working with the Barachiel energy, remember it's this path right here. So we're connected to the very highest levels of divinity. And so basically what the magus is trying to do is trying to bring the energy that's up here or up here, depending on how you look at it, trying to bring this energy up here down to levels where, people at this level or even these, people at the lower levels of consciousness can understand. So you're trying to bring the energy or the truth that's up here all the way down to, at the very least, somewhere in here. But I mean, most people are down here. But so you see the problem. Now, Barachiel, when it's corrupted, just goes, oh, fuck it, we're going to manipulate the hell out of people and use it for personal control and personal gain. Whereas Barachiel integrated goes, okay, how can we tell these stories in such a way that it helps elevate humanity's consciousness so eventually they get up here as well? Barachiel wants to be up here and control everyone down here. But when Barachiel's integrated, Barachiel becomes the positive archetype of the magician and wants to help everyone come up to their level, to the crown, get there. Okay? So, but the reason why that Crowley says that the magus lies is because you have to use parables, metaphors, language structures and stories to communicate to humanity that's at that level. So it becomes distorted. Not in a malicious way, but inevitably, it just does. So think about Jesus. Jesus spoke in parables and stories and metaphors. Now, his parables were technically lies. They're fictional stories. When he said the kingdom of heaven is a mustard seed, that's a lie. The kingdom of heaven is not a mustard seed. But it encodes a truth about a singularity of mind. Something that seems very small but contains everything within it. But saying the kingdom of heaven is a mustard seed, that is technically a lie. But they weren't meant to be taken literally. They're containers for higher truth. But guess what? People misunderstood him anyway. And not only did people misunderstand him, but evil individuals then twisted his message to use it as a method of control, to control the population. But let's ignore that part for now, okay? So Jesus wanted to communicate a message to the world, and he did so through parables and metaphors, but people misunderstood him. So that's why Crowley says the magus speaks in lies, because he speaks in stories and metaphors and symbolic structures, or in some way that's not a one-to-one mapping onto direct truth, because it's just not possible to do so unless you're just literally speaking in mathematics, and no one's going to know what the heck you're talking about if you're doing that. So, but then the fact that people misunderstood the magus, Crowley called that the curse of the magus. That's the curse. What is the curse of the magus? The curse of the magus is that the magus knows truth, but must speak it in a form that distorts it, and must accept that ultimately the magus is going to be misunderstood. The magus is not going to be understood 100% correctly. There's going to be misunderstanding, but you're trying to get, that's like the best that we can do, is provide these catalysts, these stories, these symbols to help people wake up. When Barachiel is integrated, you understand this responsibility. And so you don't use language to dominate minds, but to wake up understanding in minds. Now, you still are shaping reality. That's what language does, but you're doing it ethically. Your intention is no longer about control, but elevation, raising up consciousness. So what Borachiel does is gives you the ability to speak symbolically without intentionally deceiving, and to use metaphor, but not for manipulation, and influence, but not about enslaving. And the idea too that you can transmit truth, but knowing that it's never going to land perfectly. So in that sense, instead of being a cult leader or a spiritual guru that's manipulating people or whatever, you become the true magus or a true teacher. You know that some are going to misunderstand, but the key is that you refuse to weaponize that misunderstanding for personal power. Rather, you use your language and your symbols and metaphor aligned with the absolute, aligned with the crown. So you use it to unify rather than divide. So when Borachiel is not integrated and it has a negative effect, you are dividing through the concealment of language and keeping people controlled in a lower state of consciousness. When it's integrated properly, you unite and help people reach higher. You communicate unity, and you use language and metaphor and symbol to help people raise up their consciousness. Okay? So that is what Borachiel does. Now, what can you do to integrate Borachiel? Let me bring up some of my notes here. So let's talk about some ways that you can integrate Borachiel. So to integrate Borachiel, basically what you have to do is about understanding how to use symbol, language, and archetype to communicate divine truth. I mean, we're at some pretty damn high levels here, okay? We're talking about like some of the highest levels of consciousness that you can talk about. It's apparent. It's basically once you have glimpsed truth, how can you communicate this now? How, this is way beyond like, oh, I'm jealous of my friend because they have a better car than me. That's, real low on the tree of death when you're dealing with that kind of energy. Here, you're dealing with, okay, I understand divinity. How can I transmit that to humanity without becoming corrupted or without being the corrupter? So integrating Borachiel is learning how to do that. So some ways you can do that is by practice explaining a complex idea using a story or metaphor. Understand how to use symbolic language. Think about if you can communicate an idea through music, through art, through a story. How can you communicate these ideas in a way that resonates with the consciousness of humanity, such that they can understand what it is that you're saying and getting across? You can study how the human mind responds to stories. Learn about archetypes. Learn about emotional hooks. Learn about framing. Not so that you can manipulate, but so that you can give people the keys to free their minds. It's basically like when you're at the level of the magus, you understand how the mind operates, such that it's kind of like looking at you're almost like a mind hacker. You understand how the mind works, how archetypal symbolism affects individuals. And so you become this mental hacker, sort of. And if you are using distorted Borachiel energy, you're like hacking other minds to basically be your slaves or to get what you want. But when you're using it in a positive way, you're like giving people the keys to understand how to hack their own mind, or like you're running a virus scan, or any one of these things. You're essentially trying to train people to understand how they can liberate themselves. That's the key difference here. So let's see. You can also, this is a very important one, is consciously encourage people to think for themselves. Super important. Really important. That's why whenever someone comes on here and says, where should I start? I say, take a philosophy 101 class. I don't know how many people ever listen to me. You don't even have to take a class. There's a playlist on YouTube by, what is it, Dr. Richard Brown, something like that. It's a great playlist because philosophy will teach you how to think. And guess what cult leaders want? They want you to not think. They don't want you to question. They don't want you to think. They don't want you to know how to think. They want you to fall in line. So by being the positive aspect of the Magus, encourage people to think for themselves. That's why I say on here too, when you listen to me, I don't want you to believe what I say. I want you to begin to understand why I'm saying the things that I'm saying. There's a difference. I could tell you anything. Don't believe me just because I say it. Understand why I'm saying the things I'm saying and connect the dots in your own mind so that you can come to these logical, so you can know why it is that that a certain thing is the way that it is. So for example, when I say, oh, reality is a collection of positive and negative energy in perfect balance. Sounds good, but how the heck? But when you understand the laws of mathematics and see that reality must be equal to 0, which is a unification of all positive and negative numbers in balance such that they result in 0, you see that you understand now why I say a certain thing. So the point is, when you're using Barachiel energy positively, you want to get people to think for themselves. You want to get people to start doing this themselves. Because you can't, you will not reach a higher level of consciousness just by literally believing what someone says. You'll reach a higher level of consciousness when you begin to work it out in your own mind. So everything, that's why I talk about Gnosticism all the time. Gnosticism is not true. It's a metaphor. It's a parable. But it can become a catalyst for people to be like, hey, you know what? Yeah, the God of the Bible is kind of a dick. Maybe everything I've been told isn't true. Maybe something else is going on here. What's going on here? Wait a minute. What is reality? What is existence? What am I? What is matter? And then that train of questioning and exploration happens. Not just like, oh, yes, I believe that, Yaldabaoth is the bad guy and we have to help Sophia return the light to the source. Okay, but why? What does this actually mean? What's the real message behind this archetypal symbolism and metaphor? So basically, the key thing is this. Ask yourself, am I trying to be understood or am I trying to be believed? You don't want people to believe what you're saying. You want people to understand what you're saying. Now, belief might come along with that, and that's fine. That's great. That's good. If you like, oh, I understand what you're saying, so I believe you. You see the difference? I understand what you're saying, so I believe you. Not, oh, sure, I believe you because you said it really loud and with language that makes me feel good about myself. You want to understand, not just have blind belief, because then it's just religion. So Barachiel is a very, very important archetype to understand and work with and integrate properly. Now, for most people, you probably, you're, like I said, we're dealing with very high levels of consciousness here. So if you're at the level, where you're dealing with, oh man, I'm jealous of the money my friend makes or something like that. that's quite different in degree to, oh my God, I understand the secrets of the universe. How the heck am I going to tell people about this? And don't be a manipulative asshole when you do it, right? There's a big difference. And it's just about how, where you want to get to, where you want to go, how you want to live your life. You need to, but eventually, if you reach, basically it's like this. If you are attempting to ascend, if you're attempting to ascend the tree of life, you can ascend as high as you want. You could go up here and then just stop and be like, no, this is too much. This is hard work. I don't want to do anymore. I'm going to stay here. But if you keep going all the way, you're going to get to the point where, I need to deal with Barachiel energy. So when you're here, this is when you need to deal with Barachiel energy. Okay? All right. So let's move on. I apologize. I'm still a little sick. If my throat sounds kind of scratchy, that is why. So let's see here. Next, we are talking about Tunnel 11, which is Amproteus. Okay? Tunnel 11 is Amproteus. So this tunnel connects Gahagiel, the confusion of God, which is the shadow of Chokhmah. Chokhmah is wisdom. Gahagiel is confusion. Okay? Wisdom, confusion, which links to this particular path to Talmiel. Again, we saw this is the shadow of unity, which is division, the divided crown. Okay? So what's going on here? This is the point where we are dealing with chaotic, unfiltered force colliding with the ultimate fracture at the top of consciousness. Planetary-wise, this is related to the shadow of Neptune, which is Dionysian madness, insanity, plunging straight into the shadow of Pluto, which, as we saw again earlier, is Pluto and Chiron's void. Okay? Madness and void. Madness and void. So here, what's going on? Here, there's no comforting structure left. And Proteus is the shadow of the Fool tarot card. The Fool stands at the edge. And Proteus stands at the edge of the void and madness. So, psychologically, and Proteus represents what happens when consciousness stares into the source but sees nothing but void. So, when Amproteus blocks you, you arrive at the edge of reality and you collapse in despair. You are staring into the void. You are staring into the heart of reality. And you see it as endless cycles. You see the infinity. You see the endless repetition of existence. And you feel despair, isolation, exhaustion, nihilism, absurdism. Everything starts to feel meaningless. That maybe ultimate truth isn't real. And consciousness just loops forever. So what happens here with Amproteus is some people will intellectualize this and become cold philosophers of meaninglessness. Others can feel this emotionally as depression, numbness, existential dread. And on a spiritual level, this is the terrifying idea that unity is loneliness, that being one means being utterly alone. So Ambrosius looks at the source, looks at the absolute, and says, so this is it? An infinite void repeating endlessly into infinity. In Kabbalah, the light of existence is called the Ein Sof Or, which is the limitless light. But Ein means nothing. Ein Sof means the limitless, but it's more like the limitless nothing. Ein Sof Or is the limitless light, but it's built with nothing. So it's the endless light of nothingness. And this can turn to the belief that knowledge of truth is unattainable, detachment, feeling like life is just a cruel joke. This is a very heavy one. This is a heavy tunnel. This is a heavy path. This is the fool stepping off the cliff and falling into the void. Okay, so how can you integrate this? How can you deal with this? Let me tell you. So, oh, by the way, I forgot to mention, if you guys are looking for these cards, they're in my bio. I have a link in my bio where you can get these if you want. There are versions with black edges or without black edges, just because one is cheaper than the other, and I wanted it to be somewhat affordable. The website is, anyway, link in bio if you're interested. So how do we integrate Ambrosius? When Ambrosius integrates, that void or joke doesn't disappear. You just stop being afraid of it. But ultimately, this is where freedom lies, because the fool is free. So when you integrate Ambrosius, it teaches you that it's not that reality is a cruel joke, that it's a game. You see, that's the difference. Ambrosius, when it blocks you, life is a cruel joke, endless suffering. When you integrate Ambrosius, life is a game. We get to play it again and again. The cycles are levels in the game, new games to play. Aleister Crowley said that we are divided for love's sake, for the joy of union. So we go through these cycles of annihilation and unity and division, unity and division, unity and division, but it's for the joy of unifying again. Separation isn't a mistake, it's the rule of the game. So when you see reality this way, everything shifts, because the infinite stops feeling like suffocating and starts feeling creative. Meaning stops, not that meaning stops, but truth is something that reveals to you that it's the proper understanding. That basically, look, if existence is a cosmic joke, you can unlock the ultimate freedom, because it's a game. When you realize it's a game, you can do anything. You're free. You're free to play roles, free to explore, free to fail, free to begin again. Have fun. That's what the world needs right now. Everyone's got such a big stick up their ass. Like, oh, how you should dress, how you should look, what gender you should be. Oh my God, our avatars, they're just avatars. Have fun. Experiment. Be free. The fool leaps because he understands the joke and he's ready for the ride. You laugh in the face of the void. Life is this roller coaster of ups and downs, but it's fun when you understand it for what it is. Let's talk about integrating Proteus. Now, there are a variety of ways that you can do this. To integrate Proteus is consciously treat life as a game for a while. Begin to see it that way. Practice seeing it that way. And approach your choices in a way where you're curious. Experiment. Ask yourself, what happens if I try this? You ever see those videos on TikTok or Instagram Reels where, well, what is the caption? It says something like, the caption is something like, when you discover you have when you remember you have free will. It's something like that. When you remember you have free will. And then it'll show a video of like a guy walking down a path while he's hiking and then just being like, huh? Oh yeah. And then he just walks off the path and goes in like a completely different direction. It's that sort of energy. Experiment. Have fun. Be safe. Be careful. Don't be stupid. But experiment. Engage with play. Do creative things. Do absurd things. Experiment. And this can be like drawing badly, dancing alone, writing, whatever. It doesn't matter. But you want to connect with that joy of the Fool. The Fool is not a bad card. The Fool is a very good card. It represents freedom and new opportunities. That's you're stepping into new things joyously. And then contemplate the idea that since reality is infinite, then every moment is a chance to explore it from a new angle. So when you integrate Proteus, you don't see the void as empty, but as brimming with possibility. Let's say you look at a blank canvas. If you look at a blank canvas, unintegrated, Proteus is like, there's nothing there. Everything is meaningless. Proteus integrated goes, let's paint a picture. It can be whatever we want. That's Proteus integrated. Okay. So, that being said, let's talk about Satan. So, we're going to talk about the devil. Satan is a very special, unique tunnel that's different from all the rest. So, Satan as a klipot is number 11, but as a tunnel, he is number 33. I don't have this up on screen. I'm pointing and you're not even looking. Okay. As a klipot, Satan is 11, but as a path, he's number 33. So remember that as a klipot, as a klipa is klipot singular. As a klipa, Satan is basically like the integration of all the kalipot. And as a tunnel, as number 33, he's the integration of all paths simultaneously. Because look at the structure. You get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, then boom, 11. This is because 11 within it contains, not literally contains, but it's the synthesis of all together. And so Satan is path, klipa 11, but path or tunnel 33, because it's the integration of all the paths, of all the tunnels, but especially the paths above the river of forgetting, the river of Lethe. So it's especially the paths that are connected to the top 3, the shadow of the supernals. This is why Satan is where he is. He's not just another sentinel, he's the sentinel. Planetary wise, Satan is the shadow of Uranus, which is the Promethean dark fire. But he's also more than that. Satan is also the shadow of the entire solar system. Every planetary distortion in one. Now, symbolically, we represent Satan as the high priestess, or the shadow of the high priestess Gargophius, because Satan is concealed in this card. You see her head lands directly on the path, and she is haloed. Her halo is Satan. So Satan is not evil in the cartoon sense. Remember, these are all energies that are part of us. So Satan is everything that keeps you from divinity. But it might even be convincing you that you're getting closer to it. But that's the great illusion. Satan is called the father of lies. And these lies might be in the form of partial truthhoods, but that ultimately lead you away from the absolute. So Satan is vanity, power, greed, despair, isolation, spiritual superiority. Satan is the distortion of every path. But like I said, especially the ones above Lethe, the transpersonal ones, where you forget the absolute or try to wield power without being aligned. So this is the voice that says, I am God. But it's a dark, twisted version of it. So Satan can block you in a number of ways because it's all the illusory items that keep you from understanding. It's divinity turned inward and sealed off. And this is the true meaning of hell in this system: disconnection from the divine network. You don't really fall into hell, you cut yourself off from heaven. It's a very low state of consciousness, a consciousness that attempts to cut itself off from divinity. That ultimately is an illusion. You can't cut yourself off from divinity, but it becomes so obscured that it becomes hellish. So to understand Satan properly, you have to see him as the unintegrated sum of the tunnels above the river of Lethe. And so let me see here. Do I have all the cards? Let me take a look so that we can see what we're dealing with here. So the tunnels above, let me see here. One moment, I'm missing some of my cards. Here we go. So from Cherasith represents obsession with beauty, sex, money. From, man, I did not have these cards. Where are all my cards? From Zamradiel, he inherits false binaries, dividing reality into rigid camps, identities, ideologies, and absolutes. From Uriens, he inherits false authority, saviors, messiahs, ideologies, religions that still revolve around an external power. From Tsufliu, he inherits domination, power over others instead of power aligned with the true will. From Dagdagiel, he inherits disillusion, losing the self in unity or freezing life through overanalysis. From Gargophius, he inherits the most dangerous idea or lie of all, the idea that you can exist apart from the absolute. And from Barachiel, he inherits deception, language and symbols used for manipulation rather than liberation. And from Amprodius, he transmits the despair, seeing the void and losing joy instead of laughing at the cosmic game. Satan ultimately represents all the paths, but most importantly, these that are above the river of Lethe, because these are the ones that are cutting you off. They all cut you off from divinity at some point, but this is the ultimate path that you have to cross to be able to reach the highest levels. And so Satan is the systemic failure of integration. Satan is lies and fracture and distortion. But there's good news here. Because when Satan is integrated, you transform that energy. So as a tunnel, what Satan integrated represents is the successful integration of every tunnel on the tree of death, but especially these, the ones that are above the river of Lethe, the river of forgetting. So from Cherasith, you keep glamour, but you understand how appearance, money, and sexuality and presentation can be tools used in a positive way. From Zamradiel, you gain fluidity, no longer trapped in rigid binaries or gender ideologies or spiritual identity or gender binaries or whatever. You can move between roles without being owned by them. You can understand that reality is fluid and you're free to express yourself in whatever way you so will. From Urians, you gain the inner authority. You don't need a religion or saviors or gurus or prophets or systems to tell you who you are or what to do. From Tufliu, you gain real leadership, not dominance or submission, but the power of presence, knowing how to speak, how to stand, how to persuade, how to lead. From Dagdagiel, you gain embodied divinity. You can experience pleasure, beauty, nature, emotion, and connection without losing yourself. And with Gargophius, you gain true higher self-awareness. You recognize yourself as an eternal, individual mind, a soul, a zeta, while knowing that you're still part of the absolute. With Barachiel, you gain the power of language and symbol. You understand how narratives shape consciousness. You can speak in metaphors, stories, and archetypes and ideas that people can actually grasp without turning it into manipulation. And with Amprodius, you gain ultimate freedom. You see reality not as meaningless, but as a cosmic game, as play. You can experiment, fail, begin again, and you can laugh at the void instead of collapsing into it. So Satan integrated is what allows you to coexist into this ultimate synthesis of transformation. Satan is the rebellion against everything that would separate you from your divinity, from yourself, and from others. When Satan is properly integrated, you gain that power of rebellion of everything that keeps you and us and all of us small. Remember what the serpent said, eat from knowledge and you will be as God. So Satan integrated gives you the ultimate power that expresses itself through yourself and reality. So this is where the Promethean fire starts to really become illumination, you question everything and you're able to see through the illusion. When you have the power of the father of lies, you can see through all the lies. You refuse to bow before false authority. And you gain all these powers, but now you do it in alignment with the absolute, not against it. So I am God transforms into I am God as an expression of the all. That's the difference between hell and godhood. So integrating Satan is the most difficult, obviously, of the paths to integrate, because Satan represents all the paths. But the good news is that at least Satan's integration is pretty straightforward, because it's the integration of all the others. So it's about putting this all into, you can use any of the exercises for all these paths, because you need to integrate all of them to integrate Satan. But integrating them together is about learning how to take these powers and synthesizing them. So what I mean is, like we already talked about this, but right, like so, Cherasith teaches you how to use appearance, sexuality, image. Sufliu teaches you, the emperor teaches you leadership, persuasion. Barachiel teaches you symbolism, metaphor, and Proteus gives you freedom. We already talked about this, but it's about using it all, combining it all together. Becoming the leader who knows how to present and communicate, and the freedom to do so in a radical way. So it's about getting all of these energies working together instead of seeing them as isolated pieces. And a good example of that is like the Emperor and Sufliu and Barachiel, which is the shadow of the Emperor and the shadow of the Magician. The shadow of the Emperor is leadership, rhetoric, and persuasion. And you combine that with the Magician, Barachiel, metaphor, symbolism, understanding how consciousness works, and you get they're working in synthesis. So it's about getting all of these things working in synthesis for two purposes: to transform your mind and your personal evolution, and so you're able to spot the lies and the bullshit, and to help transform the world so that you're able to transform the universe, transform the world, transform others without getting corrupted by unresolved shadow patterns that will ultimately throw you off in one way or another. So that's what's important to understand, is when we're talking about Satan, Satan is not a demon to destroy. It's the part of you that exists and will always exist, and you need to acknowledge it so that you can integrate it. Now, remember, this is some high-level stuff. So it'll take it. Remember, you can go as high as you want. You can go as far as you want. And everyone is in a different step in the journey. And so the integration of Satan is really going to start to come into focus when you start getting to these levels of consciousness. When you start to cross the abyss and cross the river of Lethe. You start to cross the abyss and you start to cross the river of Lethe. And so when you're down here, it's not so apparent when you're at these particular levels of consciousness. It's not so apparent. But once you start to get to the get to the awareness of these higher levels, that's when it becomes very important to understand. Because remember, this is the transpersonal domain, the domain of the collective unconscious and humanity as a whole, and influencing reality and influencing existence and connecting to the collective unconscious as well as your higher self. So that, my friends, is the tree of death, the Klipot, and the tunnels of Set. But we're not done there. We're not done with Kabbalah, because we've talked about the tree of life, we've talked about the tree of death, but there's another aspect that we have to talk about in order to unify them. And that is what we will do next. So I hope you enjoyed this, my friends. As always, remember, we are way more than a channel. We are a revolution of consciousness here to wake the world the hell up. So hit like, subscribe, share this like fire, because we are here to create a new world. And every time you do, it helps light up consciousness. So I appreciate it. If you want to help out even more, consider becoming a member. You get access to a lot of great stuff like members-only videos. There's so many of them. And free downloads for members like rituals, alchemy, Kabbalah, etc. And yeah, a lot of great stuff. Helps out a lot. You can also check out my books. And if you're looking for a free way to support, as always, give me a follow on Spotify. It helps out a lot. Go do it now. The link is in the description of this video. It's right there. Just go give me a follow over there. Links to all that stuff is in the comments. Oh, as well as these cards. If you're looking for these cards, the link is in the description, not the comments, the description. But thank you all so much. I appreciate you. Big shout out to everyone who supports, especially, it's getting crowded here, Renaissance Fairy, Cassidy, Angela, Dallas, Nusalina, Chris Magistus, Eric, Sandy, Soul, Toronado, Son of God, Solange, Trickster, Banshee, Pop Out, Hyper Saiyan, and everyone else. Thank you very much, and Ad Astra.